welcome to another session on Commedia dell'Arte practice. Today we're going to talk about Pulcinella, another servant in the big family of Zanni of Commedia dell'Arte. Zanni, I remind you, is a generic name for the servants of Commedia dell'Arte, as well as being the name of a specific mask. So far we saw Brighella, Arlecchino, Zanni. They were all from the northeast of Italy, so around Bergamo and La Pianura Padana. Now with Pulcinella we move south, Naples. And in a way Pulcinella embodies certain qualities that are conventionally associated with Napolitan. First of all is a sense of humor and is musicality. A musicality that comes from the language itself, Napolitan, but also a musicality in the way he moves and he crosses the stage and in the little step that Pulcinella makes. And there is also another quality typical of Pulcinella that is probably above all the most important feature of this character, and is his incredible capability to adapt to any circumstance or any situation. The mask of Pulcinella was created by an actor called Silvio Fiorillo at the beginning of the 1600s. Fiorillo was already a comediante. He was a well-known Capitano Matamoros, but was with Pulcinella that he found his great fame. And in fact, Pulcinella is one of the biggest, most renowned masks of Commedia dell'Arte. We must say that Pulcinella as such as a character existed before the mask of Pulcinella, the character created by Fiorillo. There is a very rich folklore, so a big rich tradition, oral tradition of stories around the character Pulcinella. That's theory. Now we're going to focus on the practice. Well, like all the other Zanni, obviously, it comes from the lower classes, and lower classes back then meant peasants. So, like all the other Zanni we saw so far, Pulcinella comes from that background. We need to connect with the lower center of gravity. If you remember, we always connect with this earthiness that characterizes all the Zanni, or most of the Zanni, most of the servant of Commedia dell'Arte. Is certainly an earthy creature, no doubt about it. And after we connected with this groundedness, we can think about the animalistic quality, the second feature that we always explore with the mask. If we accept the connection between the name Pulcinella and Pulcino, that means a little chick, so hen, chicken, then we might look into that. But it's also possible that the name in reality is not strictly related. There are other theories as well. If we accept that, then the traditional mask of Pulcinella have big cheeks and a hooked nose, then we can find some connection. I would say that the bird-like nature, or the Pulcino nature of Pulcinella is primarily found in the feet, pointed feet of Pulcinella, and in the legs, and in this scatty movement, this little step, this pointed foot, yeah, and this little step, scatty, a bit like a bird. If you remember, this is very similar to the Zanni that we saw in the very first class. In fact, it's a Zanni. Why you have this posture, big curvature of the spine. For the Zanni we said there's the broad shoulder, the broad physicality. Here we can find other reasons, and one reason that is very specific to Pulcinella is that often is represented with a hunched back. So if you have a hunch, obviously you want to enhance, if you transform, giving this illusion of a hunch, you have to enhance the curvature of your spine. And let's assume that I have a hunch to my right, and that obviously affects my posture and my movement. But also we can connect it with the origin of a character. This is a transformation of the body that comes from hard work, for instance. It can also be related to simply the life of this character, not necessarily well nourished, not necessarily particularly easy life, that create this curvature and this bending forward. So we have this animalistic quality, and we have this curvature of the spine and rotation of the pelvis that we already saw for the first Zanni. There is a link where you can find that video too. So we have a lower center of gravity, we have this bird-like animalistic quality that we find also in the movement of the mask itself. Il colpo di maschera, the mask blow, the clocking, your bird-like beak, looking where you want your attention and looking at the audience. Now, what about the driving force of this mask? Well, like all the other zanni, he also wants some food. Food is the main driving force, and in general, like for the other zanni, the basic instinct. In this case, it not only has to feed himself, often Pulcinella has to feed also a family. And now, let's see the step of Pulcinella. So we have a normal step, very similar, as I said, to the one of the zanni. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. But here, we have a smaller step. Doesn't have the big gestuality or the broad zanni. What if he's in a rush? He needs to run somewhere away, probably from someone. Well, you remember, just as a comparison, the zanni with the big run, talk, talk, talk. We do the same, but smaller. It's hotter in Naples than up in Bergamo. I think he had to save a bit of energy. So, whoa, yeah, oh wait, hey. It's very fast, but doesn't achieve very much. You don't go very far, really. And finally, what about the slow walk? It was a bit of a, if you remember, the very considered Pink Panther walk that we saw in other servants, in the other zanni. And here we can do something, instead from this side, we can sluggish. And of course, you can find the lightness. Let's assume that you have to be really quiet. And you slow it down. And it's almost like pick up and let go. Pick up and let go. Pick up and let go. And if you see this sort of movement is a bit, has a specific rhythm to it, and almost like it's like a bird, like open the wings and close the wings, and open the wings and close the wings, open the wings and close the wings. It's a way to see it. That way to see it is almost like, oh, I find some energy, but actually I'm too tired, I let go. I find some energy, but actually I'm too tired, I let go. And that reminds me another association, marionette with puppet. And often I find, especially in the beautiful performances that I see of some Pulcinella from the south, there is really a bit of marionette-like, with a big gestuality with the hands. This is a world on its own, the incredible gestuality of Italians in general, Napolitan specifically, and more specifically of Pulcinella with all the gestuality. And if we look at this puppet-like movement, immediately what comes to mind to me is one of the greatest actors that we have in Italy. It's called Totò. Maybe you can use any of these and maybe find your Pulcinella in one of these ideas. Is a Pulcinella puppet-like? Is a Pulcinella sluggish? What is it? I want to work really a lot with a hunch. What is it that you want to do? Today we can take the freedom to develop our own, in our own way. This is obviously a choice. I must say, I wasn't there like anybody was there in 1620 to see what Fiorillo was doing on stage, or how the Pulcinella created back then were. We don't know for certain. But we can make choices conscious of what we see in the drawing, and also we make creative choices ourselves. And every time when I work with my actors and with my students, I said, this is a zanni. Go back to the zanni, the original zanni, and then make these adjustments that I make in sense of dimension. I find that the step of Pulcinella are smaller. Remember this bird chick-like feet. And primarily two things I always say when you start working with the character and his walks. Remember the hunch, and so more than anything else is the rhythm. It's the musicality and the rhythm of Pulcinella that distinguishes this character from the other zanni that we saw so far. But like all the other masks, at least we have a certain sense of the center of gravity, the driving force, the animalistic qualities, and some of the steps. But a note to make about the mask is the richness of Pulcinella. Like all their masks of Commedia dell'Arte, implies that often in the scenarios we might find qualities of Pulcinella that are in contradiction with qualities that we found in other scenarios. But so a Pulcinella can be in one scenario a sort of con man, a bit of a thief, and very, very poor. But in other scenarios, we have a Pulcinella that is, for example, a baker who has a little inn, and so the feature and the quality of the characters are completely different. Also, this is a very simplistic introduction, but it's normal that these masks are much more complex and layered, and and history produced loads of different Pulcinella, loads of different Arlecchino, loads of different Capitani, and all of them would have their specific qualities, and in each kind of action they embrace just something really specific. Sometimes there are scenarios that are a bit more surreal when Pulcinella have a dialogue with death, and usually he get by and win with his wittiness and his humor and his intelligence. To conclude, there isn't one way to take the mask of Commedia dell'Arte. None of them is one thing. They have in themselves contradictions, exactly as we as humans have contradictions, but you decide to play them in the way that best suits you. Very last thing, the mask. This is the mask of Pulcinella. As you can see, this mask is a really hooked nose and really strong features. This is not really the most traditional of the representation of the mask. Usually, this is a very, very sharp. Sometimes, yes, it's a hooked nose, but the features are a bit less sharp than this, and a bit more rounded, it's like a big chubby cheeks. So this is one of the interpretation of the mask maker. So here it is. I want to show you the mask a bit closer. Here we are, the mask a bit closer. This mask has been made by the fantastic Patrizia Esposito in the Netherlands. It's a beautiful mask, and it has, as I was saying, these specific qualities, a bit sharper, a bit, I would say maybe a bit more contemporary than the most conventional representation of the mask of Pulcinella. This is a black Pulcinella, dark Pulcinella, but there are also a lot of representation of Pulcinella, a lot of drawing that we see of the 1600, where the Pulcinella are actually white mask, a light mask. So it's not only one thing. The mask maker are artists themselves. They make choices. So, to remind you that when you have your mask and you work with the specific mask, obviously the mask itself will tell you something about the character. Not all the Zanni are the same, not all the Arlecchini are the same, not all the Pulcinella are the same. Wait. I'll stay away. What? Wait. Just okay.